Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is One Piece East Blue Saga Arlong Park Arc, Episode 37, Luffy Stands Up, End of a Broken Promise. Episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of what happens in this episode. So, in this episode, it picks up where the last one left off, with the Marines arriving and searching the orchard for the funds. And Nami at first tries to put on confidence, like, don't you realize that I am a leader of the Arlong pirate crew? And, you'll be in trouble with Arlong, you'll have to answer to him for messing with me. But of course, the Marine was tipped off by Arlong, so he just says that he knows the 100 million bellies are there, and that's what gives him away, because the 100 million berries is a very specific amount for their deal, and this is when Genzo and Nami realize that Arlong has betrayed them and tipped the Marines off as he's working with the Marines. This is also when Genzo, in his anger, yells out about how that money is to save the village, which reveals to Nami that the village knew all along about her deal and were only pretending not to, and Genzo explains to her that the reason they didn't let her know that they knew was that they didn't want to place the burden of their hopes onto her, because if she felt that she had to run away from Arlong, they wanted her to be able to do so, which is incredibly sweet. But basically, this leads to Nami, after they find the money, running to Arlong Park, very upset. She confronts Arlong. Arlong says that as he never received the money, he has not betrayed their deal, as their deal was that he would free Kokoyashi Village once he received 100 million berries. So, as he's no longer able to receive that money, the deal's still on, and he hasn't broken it, technically, in his mind at least. So, she then, of course, goes running off while the fishermen laugh at her for, getting tricked by Arlong. She runs back. The village has decided that they are going to, after waiting 8 years and suffering, they're not going to make Nami go through it all again. They're going to stand up for themselves, and so they head off to fight Arlong. Even though Nami tries to protest, they basically tell her, it's not on you anymore. We're going to take this on ourselves. We're not putting it on your shoulders anymore. We're going to go and fight. So they leave the village. Nami then, of course, has a bit of a mental breakdown and starts stabbing her arm where the Arlong tattoo is, yelling about it. Luffy eventually stops her. She then starts yelling at him about how it has nothing to do with him. He doesn't know what's happening. He should leave. And she starts throwing dirt at him. But he stoically stands there, takes it all until finally she gets to the point where she is willing to accept help. And she does start to cry and asks him to help her. And he gives her his treasure, which is his hat, as he then goes to where Zoro, Usopp, and Sanji are waiting at the edge of the village and yells that of course he's going to help her, before they then dramatically strut down the road towards where all of the villagers have reached the gates of Arlong Park. However, Yosoku and Johnny are basically stop them and say, we're not letting you by because we lost. You're going to lose. You have no chance. However, there are men on this island who have a very good chance of winning, so we're going to wait for them to come. In the meantime, you guys can't go past this point. And they basically hype up the crew, and then, of course, with the excellent soundtrack in the background, we see dramatically strutting along the road in a line across it our crew with Luffy, Usopp, Zoro, and Sanji coming up the road to fight Arlong. And that is the scene that we end on for this episode. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, we'll now rank the episode. We'll rank on our mostly objective ranking list, which is mostly objective because while it doesn't take into account emotions or preferences, bias and judgment can still apply. And then the personal ranking list, which is basically the emotional and preferential scoring that I decide on. Which brings us to the mostly objective rank values. And our first positive 2 points are for our single arc main character development, and this, of course, is Genzo revealing that the entire town was well aware of Nami's deal all along and the reasons why they kept it secret. Then we have our impactful slash memorable moment, lines, etc. And these are worth 3 points each, and I felt that there were two in the episode. So the first one is this is the first time that Luffy chooses to let Nami wear his treasure, which is his hat. In the future, he does let her have his hat on several other occasions, but this is the first time that it happens. And as he puts the hat on her head, we get a flashback to when he had previously in the Orangetown arc stated that the hat is his treasure and no one's allowed to touch it. But now he's giving it to Nami, so that's showing a certain level of trust in her, I would say. And then we also get the dramatic strut down the street, which honestly probably isn't iconic to most people, or impactful, or memorable, but for whatever reason, it has always stuck in my head. No matter how many seasons I watch of One Piece, this is my favorite strut moment in the entire series, and I love the soundtrack behind it. I love the seriousness on their faces. I love that there's an audience that they are walking towards and they're like spread out along the road and it's like a runway for them. I just think it's a great scene. I think the imagery is great. I think the music is great. And so for me, it is incredibly memorable, and that is why it is positive 3 points. And then lastly, we have a positive 4 points for our multi-arc main character growth. And this, of course, is Nami finally reaching the point where she's willing to trust in this crew that she has been a part of up to this point and ask for help. She was trying to take all of the burden onto her own shoulders, trying to save her village all on her own. And now she is willing to share that burden with Luffy and the rest of the crew. And I think that shows great character growth from her. So again, point +4, but there were a couple of negative messaging or behaviors. First off, we have the Marines shooting a civilian. They do shoot Nojiko. Oh, wait. Sorry, I am changing my score. I just I just remembered, and you'll see it highlighted here when the video goes live, but it's not right now, and I just remembered single arc main character development ×2, Nojiko does end up being shot in the shoulder, and that is worth another 2 points. Anyways, -2 points for the negative messaging or behavior, which is the Marines, which are supposed to be working for the government for the sake of the citizens, working against pirates. Not only are they corrupted into working for pirates, but also he shoots a civilian. Now, in this case, I was a bit iffy on whether the points would count because technically she is a thief and she did steal these properties, and so recovering them likely does fall within the job description. However, as we know that these guys are very corrupt and they're doing it on Arlong's orders, that's obviously very negative. Additionally, Nami is the one who does aggressively attack many of the Marines and then start running with her weapon towards this Marine. So if it had been Nami, I could see that being a case for self-defense and um a reasonable exertion of force. I don't feel like that's exactly what I want to say, but it's the closest I can get to right now. But like I could see it being like reasonably justified that he may have given that she had already attacked many of the Marines and was now running towards him with the weapon she attacked them with, that he could have shot her. However, that's not what he did. He shot Nojiko instead in the back, who is a civilian who has not attacked any of the Marines or himself, and therefore I did take the points because shooting of a civilian is very different than shooting in self-defense or somebody who is actively attacking you. And then the second negative 2 points is for the self-harm, which is what Nami does with her tattoo. Not only does this not accomplish anything and weaken you to the point where you're not necessarily able to assist anymore anybody that you may want to help because you have pretty much left yourself with a wound, but also just the fact that this is a kids show, or at least I view it as a kids show. I'm not sure that saying that self-harm is an appropriate response to emotional distress is necessarily a good thing to reveal to children, because obviously it's not a good response, and obviously not something that people should be encouraged to engage in. And there are more healthy coping mechanisms to emotional distress than, harming yourself. However, I do understand the drama of it, and of course, Luffy does ultimately stop her, but it is still a little bit disturbing to see that in what is a show that I would deem for a younger audience. Maybe not like little kids, but like I would say, the preteen, prepubescent sort of age group. Probably not the best messaging is all I'm saying. So I did take 2 points for that. And because I just remembered about Nojiko, instead of the 8 that I thought this was going to be, it is actually going to be a 10 out of 10 episode. So that now brings our arc rankings so far. On the mostly objective ranking, to in first place, the most wicked man of East Blue, Fishman Pirate Arlong. Luffy stands up, end of a broken promise. Usopp's death, Luffy yet to land. The Witch of Kokoyashi Village, Arlong's female officer. Survive, the Mother Belle Mare and Nami's family. Reunited, Usopp tells Nami's true story. And then in 7th, the hidden past, female fighter Belle Mare. So as to my personal opinion of this episode, I thought it was great. I'm not saying it was without its negatives, but I also think that those negatives were there for either dramatic purposes or plot progression purposes, so I can get over those on a personal level. But this episode had a lot of the, well, it had two not iconic, impactful or memorable scenes, and they are very memorable to me. The first time, of course, Luffy giving Nami his hat, Nami's character growth and finally asking for help, the dramatic strut, which is literally one of my favorite scenes in the series because I don't know what it is about it, but it hits right for me, and I always find it both amusing and appropriately dramatic and just overall fun, especially with Johnny and Yusaku, who we had thought left, but then they overheard Nojiko's story, so then now we see that they went to Arlong to try their hands at beating him, and of course failed miserably, and are now sitting outside to stop the villagers, and are just basically hyping up the group as they're coming, which I think just adds to the entire atmosphere. I think just that entire section at the end of the episode was really, really good. And then even the first part of the episode with the betrayal and the raw emotion that Nami shows, which anime is really easy to show raw emotion because they can draw it in there in a way that they can't with like real people. But anyways, the drama and the like emotional distraughtness of her I think was really well done. Like I said, I wish that they might have gone a different route than the self-harm route, especially given that we know in the future she overwrites that anyways and didn't necessarily have to harm herself to do it. Um, I didn't enjoy that, but It doesn't take away from the fact that I felt like this episode had multiple things happening, a lot of plot progression, and multiple memorable scenes that were very entertaining and that I enjoyed greatly. That is why I gave it a 10 out of 10 on this episode, because even the negatives couldn't bring it down below a 10 for me, and that is why it is in first place on our personal ranking list so far. Luffy stands up, End of a Broken Promise. Then The Most Wicked Man of East Blue, Fishman Pirate Arlong. Usopp's Death, Luffy Yet to Land. Reunited, Usopp tells Nami's true story. Survive, The Mother Bell Mare and Nami's family. The Witch of Kokoyashi Village, Arlong's female officer. And then in seventh place so far for me is The Hidden Past, female fighter Bell Mare. Which brings us now to the saga ranking so far, and this is where we are ranking each of the arcs within the saga against each other. So we have our mostly objective ranking first, which has the Romance Dawn arc in first place at 86.67%, Orangetown arc in second at 76%, Baretti arc in third at 68.33%, and Syrup Village so far is last at 64%. The Arlong Park arc currently has a score of 52 out of a possible 150. Then we move on to the personal ranking, and Buggy's Orangetown arc is in first place at 74%. The Romance Dawn arc is at 66.67%. Baretti arc in third at 52.5%. Syrup Village arc at 49%, and then Arlong Park so far has a score of 51 out of 150 so far. Bringing us now to the final segment of our series ranking so far, where we will be ranking each of the sagas against each other. And on our mostly objective ranking, the East Blue Saga currently has a score of 25 out of a possible 80, and the East Blue Saga currently has a score of 14 out of a possible 80. And with that, we've now rewatched and ranked One Piece East Blue Saga, Arlong Park Arc, Episode 37, Luffy Stands Up, End of a Broken Promise. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.